Oh, I said everything in the first part. I don't think you actually addressed anything in my intro. But if you had questions for about my presentation, I'd be glad to hear it.
Sure. Can you tell me why you can break into schism immediately after what you deem heresy?
In Greece, this is from a letter of Father Ephraim, who would later become Metropolitan Ephraim of Hakhny. He wrote, in Greece, the real power of the old calendar movement became known during the German occupation. Since the official new calendar church no longer had the support of the government because the Nazis had taken over in persecuting the old calendarists, many had died in prison from starvation or ill treatment, the old calendarists spread like wildfire. In Athens alone, they had 500 tiny chapels and churches, with a priest for every one of them. After the war and return of the government, the persecution was resumed and the movement again slackened. So during the time of Hitler, the true Orthodox were actually free. Meanwhile, we celebrate people who didn't help Christians. Basically, this is on the left is a book review. I'm not going to read the whole thing, although they get it wrong. Mother Maria Skotsova actually died of dysentery, not of the gas chambers. They did that to promote her cultus as a saint. Further, what you'll notice this is about the Paris school, which hate to bring it up, but Hitler and the Nazis were suspicious that they were Freemasonic liberals. Strangely, Rocor was also suspicious that they were Freemasonic liberals, mostly because they were Freemasonic liberals. And as you'll notice, the guys on the right who came from the Paris school are well-known authors in your community because they all ended up leading St. Vladimir Seminary's teachings, and Meyerndorf, Schmemann, Lasky, all from the Paris school. So we continue. Romania is just crazy. I mean, you have Miron Cristeu, and that's just a huge mess. As you'll notice, these pictures here on the right, that's an entire village getting arrested for holding to the old calendar. I should mention Patriarch Miron actually wanted to introduce the papal calendar and attempted to, and they were arresting everyone who disagreed. But there's even a point where communists supported the king. So it was a crazy time. But the point is, there were a lot of people being arrested for doing the right thing. Finally, Russia, self explanatory. Fun fact, if you are over the age of 23, you've been alive longer than the Patriarchate of Moscow has been commemorating the new martyrs. The guy on the right, Patriarch Alexis, literally was brought into existence in his offices and as patriarch simply because of the fact that they needed to fight the Nazis. The guy on the left, St. Joseph of Petrograd, is my name saint and still not on the calendar of the Moscow Patriarchate because he led the Catacomb Church. Well, what do Orthodox Christians do when dealing with heretical hierarchs? They basically, as the canon notes above, they sever themselves from communion with their president because he publicly preaches heresy and with bared head teaches it in the church. Such persons are to be accounted not to canonical penalty, but deemed worthy of honor for not bishops, but false bishops and false teachers have they condemned, and not fragmented the church's unity with schism, but from schisms and division have they earnestly sought to deliver the church. We know the Rocor anathema against ecumenism. I hope you all know it. If you don't, please Google it. So, what are you supposed to do when you're dealing with heretical hierarchs? You're supposed to run, not join them. Just in case you didn't get it the first time, you're supposed to run, not pray together with heretics because of the anathema against ecumenism. You're supposed to run, not kiss the Pope's hand. You're definitely not supposed to do this. No, blessing the chrism for a heretical king with some Anglicans, wrong. Just in case you don't believe in the anathema against ecumenism, it's also in the apostolic canons. And here we have bishops lighting menorahs. And finally, one, Laodicea shouldn't join with heretics and schismatics. The guy on the right, this one, should note, however, that this is now a tradition among the ecumenists because of the fact that they're so used to it. They've spent 50 years doing joint prayers with people we used to call heretics. But there's an option for you. If you take a look, believe it or not, there are millions of true Orthodox all over the world who are confessing the faith. They're teaching the Orthodox faith you thought you learned. So for 90% of you listening to this podcast, you didn't know who I was, but you did believe in the seven councils, right? You don't believe that the fourth council or the fifth council is up for debate or discussion. You don't believe David Bentley Hart isn't a heretic. You think he might be one. Become true Orthodox. You've made it this far, and we invite you to do so. Thank you.
As an Orthodox Christian, I believe in the unity of the church. That is important. It's important to preserve the teachings of Christ and his apostles. However, I do not support a divisive, exclusive mentality held by my opponent, who can so boldly claim from an ahistoric position that they are the only true Orthodox left. In the early church, there were disagreements over various theological and liturgical practices, but they were very ultimately resolved through prayer, dialogue, guidance by the Holy Spirit, and ecumenical synod. However, some groups have taken a very different approach, characterized by isolationism, legalism, and self righteousness. In the words of Father Seraphim Rose, 1979, he said, "Even when it is not fanatical, the spirit of correctness for its own sake turns out to be fruitless. As an example, I can tell you of a very good friend of ours, one of the zealot fathers of Mount Athos. He is a moderate zealot in that he recognizes the grace of the new calendar sacraments, accepts the blessings of our priests and our church, and the like, but he is absolutely strict when it comes to implying basic zealot principles. Not to have communion with not only bishops whose teachings depart from the Orthodox Church, such as the Patriarch of Constantinople, and not only with anyone who is in communion with him, but with anyone who has communion with anyone who in remote way has communion with him. Such purity is so difficult to attain in our days. Our whole Russian church abroad, for example, is tainted in the eyes by some measures of communion with other Orthodox churches. That he is only in communion with his Orthodox Church and the 10 monks that participate in it on the Holy Mountain. The rest of the Orthodox Church is not pure. Rather than seeking unity and reconciliation, these groups have created new schisms and factions within the Orthodox Church. They have rejected the authority of the ecumenical patriarchs and other Orthodox jurisdictions have instead formed their own communities and hierarchies. Furthermore, some of these groups have become fixated on certain issues, such as the calendar and ecumenism, both of which not new issues. Previous condemnations of calendar changes were based on the changes to the Paschalion. We don't even use the Roman Catholic Paschalion, or the rules for determining movable feasts, which are dependent on on Pascha. Not to mention the feasts which are also fixed. As Orthodox Christians, we should strive to preserve the unity and integrity of the Church while also being uncompromising in the face of ecumenism, to keep in line with the traditions and practices of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. We should seek to engage in dialogue while also remaining faithful to our own theological and liturgical heritage. Ultimately, it is for our love for Christ and fellow human beings that guide our actions and attitudes as Orthodox Christians. We should avoid sectarianism and legalism and instead embrace the spirit of unity within the Orthodox Church and humility that Christ exemplified during his earthly ministry and ecumenical councils, a humility which is entirely lost on the true Orthodox.
Oh, I said everything in the first part. I don't think you actually addressed anything in my intro. But if you had questions about my presentation, I'd be glad to hear it.
Sure. Can you tell me why you can break into schism immediately after what you deem heresy? Why is the immediate response to break into schism? I don't understand.
Because of Canon 15 of the First Second Synod that I had up on
Yeah,
the screen.
I think you're actually misinterpreting that canon as a whole. In fact, I
That's
think
nice,
no,
but
no. I
unfortunately,
think
the
that canon,
interpretation of Saint Nicodemus disagrees with you.
Saint Nicodemus,
Yeah, he made a comment on every one.
this canon is
Yes,
telling us to
every
obey
Guys,
single
the
guys,
canon.
hang on. One at a time. I'm okay with a little bit of talking over or cutting in. I think that some of that's appropriate, but don't make it so horrendous that we can't even understand what's going on.
I
So
just don't like
that
lies.
yeah, but it's okay. I'm not chastising you specifically, Joseph, or you, resident sleeper. It's a fiery debate. I understand that, but we need to at least keep it somewhat coherent for the audience. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Canon 15 does not say that we should completely separate from the church. It tells us to be more like Saint Cyril, who anathematized Nestorius. He maintained that Nestorius was a God-loving minister of the church in his letters to him, where he anathematized him.
Okay, 2 points. The first one is Saint Cyril is not mentioned in Saint Nicodemus's interpretation of Canon 15 of the First Second Synod. The second point is that Saint Cyril was also preparing a council for anathematization and was trying to get the council together to anathematize Nestorius. That's why he's polite.
And
So,
anathematization leads immediately to schism.
if someone commits a heresy, it leads immediately to the fall from grace of God.
A formal heresy? What formal heresy was committed?
It does well. Okay, let's try this
Go
again.
on.
It does not say formal heresy in the canon. It says heresy, and it specifically says heresy condemned by a council. It does not get, say, an ecumenical council. It simply says a council, because a lot of heresies were local and died out where they were. That's part of the history of the church. It's not like every heresy struck the world. In Yugoslavia, up until probably 20 years ago, never made it outside the bounds of Russia. The point is that that's a very weird way to look at things. The point is the church's job locally is to convene councils when somebody is preaching heresy or condemn the heretic. That it's really that simple. And it's not like some great thing. And to say schism from the church, if you're preserving the church from heresy, you're not going into schism. That's the point of the canon.
Mr. Sweden, when you leave the church, the people who
I
care
didn't leave the
most,
church.
yes, you did. The people
No,
who
I
care
didn't.
most, the people who care most about
I
the issue of
disagree.
ecumenism,
You left
Give him
the
a
church,
moment.
sir.
Give him a moment to respond. Joseph, go
the
ahead.
people who care most about the issue of ecumenism, your groups leaving the Orthodox Church doesn't help the Orthodox Church solve those issues.
I disagree. And you know why? Because
How?
that's the way we've always done it. We've always
We've
broken
always
away from
done by
heresy.
splitting into a
That is
tiny
correct.
fragmented group.
Yes, the entire history of the church is filled with it. Try the Meletian schism for a start.
What
The
about
point
the
is this
okay?
this
So
illusion.
hold on, Mr. Sweden. In the
Yes,
Arian
yes,
places-
anonymous.
Wait, resident sleeper, let him respond. Go ahead. Go ahead,
The
Joseph.
point is, yeah, the point is this. That has happened historically many times. In the Meletian schism, in the aftermath of Florence, are just two glaring examples of where that happened, where people separated from what was officially the church to protect orthodoxy. And then orthodoxy
And they
would
came
succeed.
back to the church.
No, they didn't come back. No,
You
they
can even
were
look
the
at the,
church.
you can even
The
look at
people
the
who,
Arsenic.
you don't even get it. The people who were the church were not the Unionists. They were not the people who were siding with the Arians.